I'm Kim, and you're watching Kim Wilson TV. My channel is dedicated to helping victims of narcissistic abuse get free and stay free. Before I get going with this video, I just want to take a moment to thank our friends Thea and Julia very much for your donation to our channel's PayPal account. Thank you, ladies. Sometimes friends here from the channel have said to me, Kim, I know something's going on. I just can't find that smoking gun. Everyone's looking for that big piece of evidence, that piece of evidence that proves beyond a question of a doubt that they are a cluster B, that proves that they are cheating on you beyond a question of a doubt, that absolutely proves that they are lying to you, they're being deceptive, they are sabotaging you. People want that missing component, that piece of evidence. I'm going to tell you, it was that missing evidence that kept me in that relationship. It kept me going back. It kept me sick. It kept me soul tied to it because I couldn't prove it. And I didn't want to be fast to judge. And of course, I was being gaslit and thought I was losing my mind and wasn't sure if, what I thought I was seeing, I was really seeing, and I just couldn't get my hand on that piece of evidence. And I want to talk about that today. True crime shows and you're up on how the law works and how major crime investigations unfold, you understand that there are two types of evidence. There is the direct evidence, the smoking gun, but there is another type of evidence, and that evidence is circumstantial evidence. Circumstantial evidence is going to be the receipt for the gun, the empty box of bullets, a pair of rubber gloves, these sorts of things, video footage of you in the gun store. These circumstantial bits of evidence, in many cases, are considered to be lesser types of evidence. What we're dealing with most of the time is the latter. It is the circumstantial evidence. So is it really less important? Is it really less valuable when it comes to a presentation of evidence? Now, direct evidence can be the gun, it can be an eyewitness, it can be character witnesses, it can be something direct. And that certainly does paint a fairly clear picture, but when you consider the value as far as a prosecutor goes, especially prosecutors of major crimes, violent crimes, serial killers, the most dangerous and most violent, what they're really looking for, sure, they want the direct evidence, but direct evidence doesn't really paint a picture. Not the way circumstantial evidence does. And I watched a documentary a few years ago, because I've always had a fascination with true crime, that really showed the importance and the value of circumstantial evidence because it paints a picture in a whole different way. Now, if you find the gun tells the Crown Counsel that, yes, they had possession of the gun. This was the gun that the bullet was fired from. The gun residue is on their hand. So there is a very good likelihood, like a 99.9% likelihood, that it was that person's hand that fired the gun. So what do you charge them with? Do you charge them with manslaughter? Was this a crime of passion? It doesn't really paint a picture. Yes, it tells Crown Counsel something that is undeniable, and it's extremely valuable evidence, but it really doesn't tell a story the way circumstantial evidence does. Okay, for example, let's talk about a gun crime since we're already on the gun thing. What's the date on the receipt? When did they buy the gun? Was this crime premeditated? Were they planning this months in advance? Is this something they've been working on? There's a very big difference between a methodical, well thought out, crime versus a crime of passion. And people are charged differently. The punishment is different. I mean, it could be the difference between getting 10 years in jail and getting life without the possibility of parole, or even ending up on death row. When a crime is premeditated, this shows a whole different level of debauchery. I mean, this is a whole different type of crime when someone is actively plotting to kill someone. So when did they buy the gun? What's the date on that receipt? How did they pay for that gun? all of these things start to paint a picture. Did they buy rope, rubber gloves? Did they buy cleaning supplies? Are they trying to cover the crime? When did they buy the cleaning supplies? I mean, all of this circumstantial evidence paints a very, very different picture than the gun itself. And that's what we're dealing with. That's the reality we live in. We may not ever find the smoking gun, but the circumstantial evidence that we're dealing with day after day after day is extremely all-telling, picture-painting evidence. Now, I mentioned this documentary I saw years ago, and of course the narrator, the guy interviewing these prosecutors, said, so it is this direct evidence that you really want. They said, hey, we love direct evidence, but it doesn't paint a picture the way circumstantial evidence does. Circumstantial evidence better displays motives. What was driving the person? What was the time frame? Where were their triggers? This really tells a whole different story, and it is the circumstantial evidence, much more than the direct evidence, that determines what the charge will be, what the final outcome of a trial will be if they're found guilty. I mean, if somebody, through the gathering of circumstantial evidence, is found to be a premeditated murderer, there's a very strong likelihood, depending on what state they live in, that they could end up on death row, doing life in prison without the possibility of parole versus getting 10 years. So this is extremely important information for prosecutors, and the prosecutors that they were interviewing were saying, hey, give me a mountain of circumstantial evidence any day. My thoughts is, if circumstantial evidence is extremely valuable in major crime trials, why isn't it good enough for us? Why are we gathering all this circumstantial evidence? And I'll tell you, I had quite a mountain of circumstantial evidence. Locks on cell phones, constantly changing locks on cell phones, hours of time missing, hairbrushes, lipstick tubes I'd never seen before, hair on my pillow, lipstick on glassware that was in my sink that was in a color I never owned. All of these things are circumstantial evidence. And of course, what was happening was I was dealing with each in a little compartment. Okay, how did the hair get on the pillow? Oh, well, the dog must have jumped up on the bed. My mother was here. My mother was helping me around the house. I was pulling the hair out of the hairbrush over the bed. I mean, each of these things on their own was being dismissed by the narc. And of course, I was nuts out of my mind from gaslighting and sadness and misery and confusion. So one by one, I was letting it go. I never stopped to look at this huge body of circumstantial evidence, and man, there was mountains of it. Dealing with a narcissist, it's unlikely that you're ever going to find the direct evidence. You're never going to get a confession. You're not going to find the smoking gun. The witness testimony's never coming, because someone's probably not going to show up at your door and say, hi, I'm a member of the narc harem and I'm having sex with your partner. So these types of direct evidence are not likely to fall into your lap. And the circumstantial evidence is most certainly there, and it's piling up and piling up. And one of the biggest components when it comes to circumstantial evidence, in my opinion, is the way we feel. Fear, the anxiety, the heightened levels of stress, the spikes in emotional states, the confusion, the disorientation, all of it. All of it is incredibly strong circumstantial evidence. When you are feeling bad, living on eggshells, just feeling sick, adrenal fatigued, worn out, like your soul's being sucked out of you, this is some pretty damning circumstantial evidence. In addition to that, so many of us have physical symptoms. My nose was bleeding constantly. My hands were shaking. I was stuttering. No, I don't normally stutter. No, my hands don't normally shake. These were all very, very powerful components when it comes to circumstantial evidence. Completely isolated, cut off from my family, my support networks. My money was dwindling. I was having trouble at work. I no longer had any hobbies or interests. All of this very, very strong circumstantial evidence. I mentioned direct and circumstantial evidence because I was making reference to a gun crime, but there is another type of evidence, and this is called demonstrative evidence, and this is also very widely used in major crime trials. Demonstrative evidence is the person's history. What has their past behavior been? Have they displayed over their lifetime signs of violence, signs of anger, irresponsibility, a lack of consideration for other people? All of this demonstrative evidence is also very important, but it doesn't necessarily fit our circumstance because in my case, I should say, doesn't really fit my case because I didn't have that history. Trevor did everything in his power to ensure that I never spoke to one of his other victims. Trevor was a master at driving a wedge between victims. He had several exes. And the thing was, he had spoken to the exes about me, told them what a horrible, crazy, psychotic witch I was. He had told me all the same things about them and said, Kim, they're dangerous, they're violent. Honey, I'm just trying to protect you. Don't speak to them. If she ever calls, hang up. If she ever comes to the door, run away. She's going to hurt you. So, of course, there was this fear element that he had built in. So, once I could not, engage any of these other women, there was no possibility for me coming to understand what that demonstrative evidence would have ever looked like, because those women were all kept from me. And to be honest, he sold a pretty good story. I was, in fact, afraid of them. And when they would come to the door, I would say, Trevor, I'm just going to go in the bedroom because, I'm a fairly slim woman and I don't want to get beat up in my doorway, with two little children standing there, because they would come, of course, to drop off Trevor's kids for the weekend or whatever. And I certainly don't want to be in a physical altercation with anyone. So when they did come, he had absolutely created a fear around them. So when we were confronted with them, I would run away. I remember one time very clearly, I was cutting through the food court in the mall and I saw one of Trevor's exes and I absolutely panicked. I turned around and I booked it the hell out of there thinking, oh my God, she's going to hurt me. She's dangerous. And had he not done that, of course, I would have been on friendly terms with them. The woman was dropping her kid off every weekend. I wished I had have had a good relationship with her. I wished I had been able to communicate, her parenting wishes and things like that. But he had ensured that me and these other women would never speak because he'd made us all believe that the other one was nuts, crazy, violent, dangerous. The fact that he did that is in itself some pretty strong demonstrative evidence, but of course, that's all in retrospect. I certainly had no access to that information, to his history, because of course, his demonstrative evidence had worked pretty effectively. Still asking that question, is the narc a narc? Well, I'm going to tell you, if you're here at YouTube looking for the answer to that question, I would say that's a really strong piece of circumstantial evidence, because most people know what's happening in their life, in their home, in their bed. If you truly do not know what the heck is happening in your own life, chances are you're a victim of narcissistic abuse. Normal people are in a relationship, they don't question whether or not they're being lied to, cheated on, sabotaged. The fact that you're feeling like those things are happening is a pretty strong indicator that they're happening. That your life, your career, your feeling of self, your feeling of hopefulness, your bright outlook on the future has been so gravely altered. All of this is incredibly powerful circumstantial evidence. So if you're wondering, is any of this real? Is it me? Am I the crazy person? Am I the one that needs medication? Am I the one that needs help? Do I need therapy? The fact that you're asking those questions is pretty strong circumstantial evidence that you're not the culprit. bad person doesn't ask, am I being a bad person? The bad person doesn't care if they're being a bad person. It's a good person that will question their behavior, question their thought patterns, question their actions. And that too is great circumstantial evidence. If you're at all doubting today what's happening in your life, the fact that you're doubting what's happening in your life is cause to make some radical changes in your life. You today still looking for the evidence, if you just stop for a minute, clear your mind and take a look at what's happening in your life, you are chin deep in evidence. Guys, I love you lots. I'm Kim. You're watching Kim Wilson TV. I hope you guys are having a great narc-free day.